Behind the sweeping romance and forbidden passion of television's second highest-rated miniseries lay some truly bizarre secrets. From Barbara Stanwyck being too young to play a 75-year-old to an ABC executive wanting Chevy Chase as the priest, the production was filled with unexpected twists that rivaled the drama on screen. One co-star couple fell in love while another actor forgot her lines during a steamy scene with a half-naked Richard Chamberlain. Here are the 15 weird facts you didn't know about the Thornbirds 1983. Fact 1. Barbara Stanwyck was too young at 75. In one of Hollywood's most ironic casting challenges, 75-year-old Barbara Stanwyck was considered too youthful to play a 75-year-old character. The makeup department for the Thornbirds faced the unusual task of aging one of cinema's most legendary actresses because she simply looked too good for her age. Stanwyck had spent decades maintaining her striking appearance and refusing to wage what she called a war on aging. Her natural vitality and strong bone structure meant that even at 75, she possessed a vibrancy that didn't match the weathered, bitter character of Mary Carson. The wealthy ranch matriarch was supposed to be a woman worn down by years of harsh Australian outback living and personal disappointments. The production team found themselves in the peculiar position of adding wrinkles, age spots, and other signs of wear to an actress who was already the exact age of her character. Makeup artists worked extensively to create the illusion that Stanwyck was older and more frail than she actually appeared. They needed to transform her naturally commanding presence into someone who looked genuinely aged by decades of sun, wind, and emotional turmoil. This situation highlighted Stanwyck's remarkable physical condition and natural beauty, even in her 70s. She had always been known for her no-nonsense approach to aging, never trying to appear younger than her years, but also maintaining her health and vigor throughout her long career. The irony wasn't lost on the cast and crew that they were essentially trying to make Barbara Stanwyck look like what most people expected a 75-year-old woman to look like. The extra aging work proved worthwhile, as Stanwyck's performance as Mary Carson became one of the most memorable aspects of the miniseries. Her portrayal of the manipulative, jealous ranch owner earned her both an Emmy Award and a Golden Globe, proving that sometimes the best casting choice requires a little help from the makeup department to achieve the perfect look. Fact 2. An executive wanted Chevy Chase as the priest. During the casting process for the Thornbirds, an ABC network executive made one of the most bewildering suggestions in television history by proposing comedian Chevy Chase for the role of Father Ralph de Bricassart. This recommendation would have transformed the passionate, conflicted Catholic priest into a completely different character, given Chase's reputation for comedy and his distinct lack of dramatic gravitas. Producer David Wolper received this suggestion during the early stages of casting, when the network was still exploring different directions for the miniseries. The executive apparently saw something in Chase that could work for the complex role of a priest torn between his religious vows and his forbidden love for Maggie Cleary. At the time, Chase was primarily known for his work on Saturday Night Live and comedy films, making him an extremely unlikely candidate for a sweeping romantic drama. Wolper's response to this casting idea was diplomatically measured, as he later recalled telling the executive, "Let me think about it." This polite deflection allowed him to avoid directly rejecting the suggestion while buying time to pursue more suitable candidates. The producer clearly understood that casting Chase would have fundamentally altered the tone and credibility of the entire production. The role of Father Ralph required an actor capable of conveying deep spiritual conflict, romantic passion, and the weight of moral struggle across several decades of the character's life. Richard Chamberlain, who ultimately landed the part, brought years of experience in dramatic roles and miniseries, along with the classical good looks and commanding presence needed for the character. The Chevy Chase suggestion remains one of those fascinating what-if moments in television history, demonstrating how differently the Thornbirds could have turned out with alternative casting choices. Wolper's diplomatic handling of the situation ensured that the miniseries maintained its serious dramatic tone and became the beloved classic that audiences remember today. Fact 3. The Australian bus was completely wrong. The Thornbirds featured what the production jokingly called the most dangerous bus in Australia, though the vehicle never actually set foot on Australian soil. Since the entire miniseries was filmed in California rather than Australia, the production team used an American bus for scenes that were supposed to take place in the Australian outback, creating a major logistical problem that viewers might not have noticed. The issue stems from the fundamental difference in driving patterns between the United States and Australia. Americans drive on the right side of the road with the driver's seat positioned on the left side of the vehicle, while Australians drive on the left side of the road with the driver's seat on the right side. This means that bus doors in America open to the curb on the right side of the vehicle, but in Australia, they would open into the middle of traffic. If the American bus shown in the Thorn Birds were actually operating in Australia, passengers would be forced to board and exit directly into oncoming traffic rather than safely from the roadside. The bus door would open into the active traffic lane, making every stop a potentially life-threatening situation for anyone trying to get on or off the vehicle. This transportation mix-up represents just one of many details that the production team had to work around while filming an Australian story in California. The practical challenges of recreating an authentic Australian setting in the United States led to numerous compromises, though most were less obvious than having passengers boarding buses in the middle of busy roads. The bus scenes were filmed as part of the broader effort to create the illusion of rural Australia using California locations, including Southern California for outback scenes and Hawaii for the Queensland portions of the story. While the American bus may have looked convincing enough for television audiences, any Australian viewers familiar with their country's transportation systems would have immediately recognized that something was seriously wrong with this particular vehicle. Fact 4. Michelle Pfeiffer, lost to vulnerability. The casting of Maggie Cleary became one of the most competitive audition processes in television history, with the role eventually coming down to a surprising decision based on perceived strength rather than acting ability. Producer David Wolper and his team found themselves choosing between accomplished actresses for what many considered the role of a lifetime, but their final decision had nothing to do with traditional acting skills. Michelle Pfeiffer, Jane Seymour, Kim Basinger, Jessica Lange, Kate Capshaw, and Olivia Newton-John were among the many established actresses who auditioned for the part of Maggie. The competition was so intense that it generated what Wolper described as a casting frenzy similar to the search for Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. British actress Lynn Frederick even went so far as to dye her hair red, specifically to showcase how she might look in the role. After extensive auditions and screen tests, the decision ultimately came down to Jane Seymour and relative newcomer Rachel Ward. The producers acknowledged that Seymour was the superior actress of the two candidates, with more experience and proven dramatic range. However, they made their choice based on a completely different criteria that had nothing to do with acting talent or screen presence. Wolper explained that the character of Maggie required someone who projected a sense of fragility and emotional vulnerability that would make audiences believe she could be deeply wounded by her circumstances. Jane Seymour, despite her excellent acting abilities, came across as too strong and self-possessed for the role. The producers felt that her natural confidence and poise worked against the character's need to appear delicate and easily hurt. Rachel Ward, on the other hand, possessed what Wolper described as an almost ethereal quality, saying that she seemed like someone you could blow on and she'd fall over. This perceived fragility, rather than superior acting chops, ultimately won her the career-defining role that would make her a household name and lead to her real-life romance with co-star Brian Brown. Fact 5. World champion sheep shearer consulted. The production team of the Thorn Birds went to extraordinary lengths to ensure authenticity in their sheep shearing scenes by hiring Charles Swaim of Drakesville, Iowa, who held the title of world champion sheep shearer at the time of filming. This attention to detail demonstrates how seriously the producers took the agricultural aspects of their story, even though they were filming an Australian sheep station story entirely in California. Sheep shearing plays a crucial role in the Thorn Birds, as the Cleary family works on Drogheda, a massive sheep station in the Australian outback. The scenes needed to look convincing to audiences who might be familiar with actual sheep farming, particularly viewers in Australia and New Zealand, where sheep farming is a major industry. Getting the techniques wrong would have immediately signaled to knowledgeable viewers that the production team didn't understand the subject matter. Swaim brought his world-class expertise to the set, teaching the actors proper shearing techniques and ensuring that the scenes looked realistic when filmed. His championship status meant that he could demonstrate the fastest and most efficient methods used by professional shearers, giving the production an authentic foundation for these important sequences. The involvement of a world champion also added credibility to the production's claims of accuracy. The decision to hire Swaim reflects the broader commitment that producer David Wolper had to making the Thorn birds as authentic as possible, despite the limitations of filming in the United States rather than Australia. While other aspects of the production required compromises due to location constraints, the sheep shearing scenes could be made completely accurate thanks to Swaim's expertise. This level of technical consultation was relatively unusual for television productions in the early 1980s, when many shows relied on general advisors rather than seeking out world-class experts in specific fields. The investment in Swaim's knowledge helped ensure that one of the most important agricultural elements of the story maintained its credibility throughout the miniseries. Fact 6. Barbara Stanwyck forgot lines during seduction scene. Barbara Stanwyck experienced something that almost never happened in her legendary 6-decade career, when she completely forgot her lines during one of the Thorn birds' most intense scenes. Known throughout Hollywood as the ultimate professional who always came prepared and never missed a beat, Stanwyck found herself at a complete loss for words during her character's seduction attempt with Richard Chamberlain's father Ralph. The scene in question featured Mary Carson trying to seduce the young priest, with Chamberlain appearing in the scene stripped down to very little clothing. Stanwyck's character was supposed to deliver a passionate speech about her desires and frustrations, but when the cameras rolled, the actress, who had never been known to stumble over dialogue, simply went blank. This was particularly shocking to the cast and crew, because Stanwyck had built her reputation on being completely prepared for every scene. Throughout her career, Stanwyck was famous for her work ethic and professionalism, earning the respect of directors and co-stars who knew they could always count on her to know her lines perfectly. She had worked with some of Hollywood's biggest names over the decades and had never been the cause of delays due to forgotten dialogue. Her preparation was so thorough that other actors often looked to her as an example of how to approach their craft. Richard Chamberlain later recalled the incident, noting how unusual it was for someone of Stanwyck's stature and experience to have such a moment. The circumstances of the scene, with Chamberlain appearing nearly naked and the charged nature of the seduction sequence, apparently created enough distraction to throw off even one of Hollywood's most seasoned professionals. The moment became a memorable behind-the-scenes story that highlighted how even the most experienced actors can be affected by unexpected circumstances during filming. For Stanwyck, who prided herself on never letting personal reactions interfere with her professional duties, this brief lapse represented a rare crack in her otherwise flawless professional armor. Fact 7. Brian Brown read Rachel Ward's palm first. Brian Brown chose an unusually mystical approach when he first met Rachel Ward on the set of The Thorn Birds, introducing himself by offering to read her palm and making a prediction that would prove remarkably accurate years later. This unconventional icebreaker marked the beginning of one of Hollywood's most enduring real-life romances, though neither actor could have known at the time that they were starting a relationship that would last over 40 years. During their initial meeting in the Simi Valley, California, where the production was filming the Drogheda Ranch scenes, Brown approached Ward with his palm-reading offer rather than using traditional conversation starters. The Australian actor examined Ward's hand and confidently predicted that she would have 3 children in her future. At the time, Ward was a 24-year-old actress focused on her career, and the idea of having children was likely far from her immediate thoughts. The palm reading served as Brown's unique way of breaking the ice with his co-star, showing a playful and slightly mysterious side that apparently appealed to Ward. Rather than relying on typical Hollywood charm or discussing their careers, Brown chose this more personal and intimate approach to getting to know the woman who would eventually become his wife. The prediction turned out to be completely accurate, as Brown and Ward went on to have 3 children together: Rosie, Matilda, and Joe. The couple married in 1983, shortly after filming Wrapped, and have remained together ever since. Their children have all pursued careers in the entertainment industry, with Matilda becoming an actress and businesswoman. Brown's palm-reading technique apparently worked better than any conventional pickup line could have, as it created an immediate connection between the 2 actors. The fact that his prediction came true added an almost magical quality to their origin story, giving them a unique tale to tell about how their relationship began during the filming of one of television's most beloved romantic dramas. Fact 8. Dead Barbara Stanwyck was visibly breathing. One of the most noticeable continuity errors in the Thorn Birds occurs during Barbara Stanwyck's dramatic death scene, where viewers can clearly see her chest rising and falling as she continues breathing while portraying the deceased Mary Carson. This mistake made it into the final cut of the miniseries, creating an unintentionally amusing moment during what was supposed to be one of the most emotionally powerful scenes in the production. Mary Carson's death represents a crucial turning point in the story, as her manipulative final act sets the central conflict between Father Ralph and Meggie into motion. The scene required Stanwyck to lie completely still while other characters discovered her body and reacted to her passing. However, the physical demands of remaining motionless for extended periods during multiple takes proved challenging, even for an actress of Stanwyck's experience and professionalism. The breathing error becomes particularly noticeable when Richard Chamberlain's Father Ralph approaches the supposedly dead Mary Carson and gently closes her eyes in a tender final gesture. During this close-up moment, Stanwyck's chest movement is clearly visible to viewers, breaking the illusion that her character has actually died. The scene continues with other characters mourning around her supposedly lifeless body, while her abdomen continues its telltale rise and fall. This type of mistake was more common in television productions of the early 1980s, when editing technology was less sophisticated and reshoots were more expensive and time-consuming than they are today. Directors often had to choose between multiple imperfect takes, sometimes accepting minor flaws rather than spending additional time and money to achieve perfection. The error has become something of a beloved blooper among fans of the miniseries, who often point it out during re-watches of the show. Despite this technical flaw, Stanwyck's performance in the death scene remains emotionally effective, and her overall portrayal of Mary Carson earned her both an Emmy Award and a Golden Globe for her work in the miniseries. Fact 9. Audrey Hepburn was offered Mary Carson. The casting of Mary Carson involved some of Hollywood's most legendary actresses, with Audrey Hepburn being the first choice for the role of the wealthy, manipulative ranch owner who becomes obsessed with Father Ralph. This casting decision would have created a dramatically different version of the character, given Hepburn's established screen persona as elegant, refined, and sympathetic rather than cruel and scheming. Hepburn's association with graceful, romantic roles in films like Roman Holiday and Breakfast at Tiffany's made her an unexpected choice for Mary Carson, a character who serves as one of the primary antagonists in The Thorn Birds. The role required an actress capable of portraying jealousy, manipulation, and bitter cruelty, as Mary Carson uses her wealth and power to control the people around her, particularly Father Ralph and the Cleary family. While Hepburn was offered the part, she ultimately declined the role, leaving the door open for other actresses to pursue what many considered a plum television opportunity. Bette Davis, known for her ability to play strong-willed and sometimes villainous characters, actively campaigned for the role after learning it was available. Davis had built much of her career on playing complex, often unsympathetic women, making her a natural fit for Mary Carson's manipulative personality. Despite Davis's interest and proven track record with similar characters, the role eventually went to Barbara Stanwyck, who brought her own brand of toughness and vulnerability to the part. Stanwyck's casting proved to be inspired, as she managed to make Mary Carson both despicable and pitiable, showing the loneliness and desperation beneath the character's cruel exterior. The decision to pass on Hepburn's elegant screen presence in favor of Stanwyck's more earthy and direct acting style helped establish the tone for the entire miniseries. Stanwyck's performance earned her both an Emmy and a Golden Globe, suggesting that the producers made the right choice in seeking an actress who could fully embrace the character's darker qualities. Fact 10. The priest advisor left the priesthood. Father Terence Sweeney, the Emmy Award-winning Jesuit priest who served as technical advisor for the Thorn birds, experienced his own version of the central conflict he helped portray on screen when he left the priesthood 3 years after the miniseries aired and married an actress. This real-life parallel to the show's main storyline created an unexpected connection between the fictional drama and the actual experiences of someone involved in its creation. Sweeney brought both religious expertise and television experience to the Thornbirds, having already earned recognition in the entertainment industry before joining the production. His Emmy Award demonstrated that he understood both the spiritual and dramatic elements needed to make the priest character believable and compelling. His role involved ensuring that the religious aspects of Father Ralph's story remained authentic and respectful, while still serving the dramatic needs of the miniseries. The technical advisor's job required him to work closely with Richard Chamberlain and other cast members to help them understand the complexities of Catholic priesthood, including the vows, rituals, and internal struggles that would affect someone in Father Ralph's position. Sweeney's insights helped shape the portrayal of the priest's torn loyalties between his religious calling and his human desires, making the character's conflicts more believable and emotionally resonant. In 1986, Sweeney made the same choice that Father Ralph ultimately could not bring himself to make in the story by leaving the priesthood to marry Pamela Susan Shoop, an actress and daughter of actress Julie Bishop. The couple later co-authored a book titled What God Hath Joined that discussed their relationship and Sweeney's decision to leave his religious vows behind for love. This development added an ironic twist to the Thornbirds' legacy, as the man who helped create the authentic portrayal of a priest struggling between love and duty ultimately chose love in his own life. Sweeney's personal experience gave him unique insight into the very conflicts that drove the miniseries' central storyline. Fact 11. Ice-cold, tropical swimming scene. One of the Thornbirds' most romantic moments became a test of endurance for Rachel Ward and Richard Chamberlain when they filmed their passionate swimming scene in water that was described as ice-cold rather than the warm, tropical temperature viewers might expect. The scene, which takes place on the fictional Matlock Island during what should have been a warm, intimate getaway, required the actors to perform convincingly romantic interactions while dealing with extremely uncomfortable filming conditions. Rachel Ward later revealed that the water temperature during filming was so cold that both she and Chamberlain were left shivering between takes. The scene was supposed to capture the heat of passion between Meggie and Father Ralph during their brief time together, but the actors had to fight against their natural reactions to the freezing water in order to maintain the romantic mood required by the script. The Matlock Island scenes were actually filmed in Hawaii, specifically on the island of Kauai, which was chosen to represent the Queensland coast of Australia. While Hawaii is known for its warm, tropical climate, the specific location and timing of the filming apparently created conditions that were far from comfortable for extended water scenes. The production team needed to capture the beauty of a tropical paradise, but the practical realities of filming meant that the actors experienced something much less pleasant than the paradise their characters were supposed to be enjoying. Ward's recollection of the frigid filming conditions adds a layer of professional dedication to what appears on screen as an effortlessly romantic sequence. The actors had to maintain their chemistry and emotional connection while dealing with physical discomfort that could easily have broken the spell of the scene. Their ability to perform convincingly despite the challenging conditions demonstrates the level of commitment required to create television magic. The contrast between the warm, sensual appearance of the final scene and the uncomfortable reality of filming it shows how much work goes into creating the illusion of perfect romantic moments on screen. Fact 12. Film equipment visible in shots. The Thornbirds contains numerous production errors that made it through the editing process and into the final broadcast, with multiple instances of film equipment appearing clearly visible in scenes throughout the miniseries. These mistakes range from subtle reflections to obvious shadows and equipment that sharp-eyed viewers can spot during regular viewing, creating unintentional glimpses behind the scenes of the production. One of the most noticeable errors occurs during the horse race scene in the first episode, when Mary Carson presents Father Ralph with his prize horse after his victory. As the camera follows the action, viewers can clearly see the shadow of a film crew member's head projected onto the flank of Ralph's horse and his leg. This type of crew shadow represents one of the most common filming mistakes, where lighting and camera positioning inadvertently capture the shadows of people who should remain invisible to viewers. Another significant equipment visibility problem happens when Luke walks back to the wool shed after the other shearers have left Drogheda. As the camera rises to follow his movement in what should be a sweeping cinematic shot, part of the camera crane becomes visible in the lower right corner of the frame. This type of error typically occurs when camera operators push the limits of their equipment to achieve dramatic shots but fail to account for how much of the filming apparatus might appear in the final image. Additional equipment problems appear in indoor scenes, including a moment when Fiona plays piano while Frank enters from the rain outside. During this sequence, filming equipment becomes visible reflected in the window, breaking the illusion that viewers are watching events unfold naturally rather than observing a carefully constructed television production. These technical mistakes were more common in television productions of the early 1980s, when editing technology was less sophisticated, and the time pressures of television scheduling often meant that minor errors were accepted rather than requiring expensive reshoots to correct every visible flaw in the final product. Fact 13. Only one Australian in the Australian cast. Brian Brown stood alone as the single Australian-born actor cast in a major role throughout the Thorn Birds, despite the miniseries being set entirely in Australia and telling the story of Australian ranch life over several decades. This casting choice reflected the practical realities of filming an American television production rather than any attempt to authentically represent Australian performers in an Australian story. The lack of Australian actors actually made some narrative sense when considering the backgrounds of the main characters within the story itself. Father Ralph de Bricassart was Irish-born. Mary Carson had also emigrated from Ireland, and Paddy Cleary was an Irish immigrant as well. Fee Cleary and most of her children were born in New Zealand before the family moved to Australia, making them technically New Zealanders rather than native Australians. However, this still left Brian Brown's character Luke O'Neill and Maggie's children as the primary characters who should have been genuinely Australian-born within the story. The casting of American and British actors for these roles meant that the production relied heavily on the actors' ability to adopt convincing Australian accents, with varying degrees of success throughout the miniseries. Brown's casting proved particularly valuable because he brought authentic Australian speech patterns and cultural understanding to his role as Luke O'Neill, the rough sheep shearer who becomes Maggie's first husband. His natural accent and mannerisms provided a genuine Australian presence that helped ground the production in its supposed setting, even though the filming was taking place entirely in California and Hawaii. The decision to cast primarily American and British actors reflected the commercial realities of producing a miniseries for American television audiences in the early 1980s. Star power and name recognition typically took precedence over geographic authenticity, leading to productions that prioritized familiar faces over cultural accuracy. Brown's inclusion represented a compromise that gave the production at least one genuinely Australian voice among its principal cast members. Fact 14. Cars drove on the wrong side. Every vehicle shown in the Thorn Birds drives on the right side of the road using left-hand drive cars, which is completely backwards from actual Australian driving laws and customs that have been in place since the early 1900s. This fundamental error appears consistently throughout the miniseries, making it immediately obvious to any Australian viewers that the production was filmed somewhere other than their country. Australia follows the British driving system, where traffic moves on the left side of the road and cars are built with the driver's seat positioned on the right side of the vehicle. This arrangement allows drivers to have the best view of oncoming traffic when making turns and passing other vehicles. The United States uses the opposite system, with right-side driving and left-hand drive cars, which is exactly what appears throughout the Thorn birds despite its Australian setting. The driving error extends beyond just the positioning of cars on roads to include the vehicles themselves, which feature steering wheels on the left side rather than the right side where they would be located in genuine Australian automobiles. This means that every time a character gets behind the wheel, they are sitting in the position where a passenger would normally sit in an actual Australian car. Since the entire miniseries was filmed in California, the production team used American roads, American vehicles, and American driving patterns throughout the filming process. The cost and complexity of either importing right-hand drive vehicles or digitally flipping all the driving scenes would have been prohibitive for a television production in the early 1980s. This type of geographic inconsistency was relatively common in Hollywood productions of the era, when filming overseas was more expensive and logistically challenging than it is today. Many productions chose to accept these kinds of authenticity compromises rather than deal with the practical difficulties of location shooting. For American audiences unfamiliar with Australian driving customs, the error would likely go unnoticed, but it created an obvious anachronism for viewers from Australia or other countries that drive on the left side of the road. Fact 15. The farm name was mispronounced constantly. Throughout the Thorn birds, the American cast consistently mispronounced the name of the central sheep station, Drogheda, as Drogheda, instead of using the correct Irish pronunciation, Drogheda, creating a linguistic error that persisted through every episode of the miniseries. This mispronunciation occurred because the actors were unfamiliar with Irish phonetic rules and simply read the name as it appeared to them in English spelling. The sheep station in the story was named after the real Irish town of Drogheda, which is located north of Dublin and has significant historical importance in Ireland. According to the novel and miniseries backstory, a former resident of the Irish town had originally named the Australian property as a way of remembering his homeland. This connection made the proper pronunciation culturally significant to the story's Irish heritage themes. The pronunciation error stems from differences between Irish and English phonetic systems, particularly regarding the letter combination groat, which appears in the middle of Drogheda. In Irish pronunciation, this H combination typically produces an H sound rather than being pronounced as separate letters or remaining silent as it often does in English words. The correct Irish pronunciation treats the N as a soft aspirated sound, creating Drogheda rather than the Drogheda that American actors naturally produced. The American cast members had no way of knowing the proper pronunciation without specific coaching in Irish phonetics, since the name appears straightforward when written in English letters. Old Hollywood tradition typically had actors use their natural accents rather than attempting detailed linguistic accuracy, which meant that pronunciation coaching for foreign place names was not commonly provided during television productions of the early 1980s. This pronunciation mistake represents one of many small details that revealed the production's American origins, despite its Australian setting and Irish character backgrounds. For viewers familiar with Irish geography and pronunciation, hearing Drogheda repeatedly throughout the series would have immediately signaled that the actors were not familiar with authentic Irish speech patterns.